is really not.
We're just gonna pause it right there. If you are trying to persuade anyone about anything, you should use the language that they use to describe themselves.
Okay, it is time for the very first Apologist Reacts with two apologists.
Woohoo!
Welcome, Emily. Emily has the idea, like, what if we both did Apologist Reacts together? It's like, that is such a cool idea. So we are going to do that. We're going to react to a video. This will be, I think, the first time I've seen this once.
I have not.
You have not?
Yeah.
This might be the last Dobbs-related thing I do for Apologist Reacts, but I thought this was interesting. So my friend and former boss, Jonathan Keller, who now runs California Family Council, he did a bunch of interviews like all of us did on the day that Dobbs happened. And so he was sending me, like, as he did, he's like texting me like this video, and I was kind of giving him tips and suggestions and things like that. And he sent me this one. This was like the third or fourth one, I think, that he did, where Fox brought him on with Gloria Allred, who is
that's fun.
very, very familiar with debating abortion. And I thought it was interesting. It was interesting to kind of see the things that were going on and the ways, like the ways that she was kind of trying to force the debate into different things and watching John try to react. And so we are going to kind of talk about, like, what do we like that John is doing? What could John have done better? We have his permission to do this. He's actually really excited for us to react to this video. He has been super humble. He's not just looking for compliments from me. I've been giving him, like, hey, try to do, like, these things differently the next time. Here's what you're doing well. He's awesome. Just a good guy. Love John. So we're going to watch this clip and see. We'll just kind of watch what happens.
Just for clarification, can you explain to our viewers who Gloria Allred is? Because we know that name, but I don't think everyone does.
Yeah. So Gloria Allred is a super famous pro-choice lawyer. She's done a lot of different things. It's not like she only works on the abortion thing, but she kind of, for the reason a lot of pro-lifers know of her is because she represented Norma McCorvey in Roe v. Wade, the Roe of Roe v. Wade. Norma McCorvey also being kind of a controversial figure, too, because she became, or at least started calling herself pro-life later. And then a documentary came out right after she died saying she became pro-choice. We did a whole podcast about that. If you want to hear us, we reviewed that film. That was a while ago, but we had some thoughts about that. So anyway, if people want to look into that, they can. But yeah, this was Gloria Allred and John Keller doing a debate about Dobbs. And, again, this was a hard time to be trying to have good dialogues with pro-choice people. Of course, this isn't exactly a dialogue. This is more like a debate on TV. So like some of these other videos that I've reviewed, it's not one-for-one parallels, but I think we can still learn some things from it. So let's check it out.
Let's take you back in time for a moment when a woman named Norma McCorvey sued Henry Wade, who was an official in Texas, over the right to an abortion. The court gave her the name Jane Roe. The case went to the Supreme Court, and justices ruled 7-2 in favor of Roe. In 1989, Roe was represented by Gloria Allred. Gloria joins us now live to share her reaction tonight after just attending one of the protests in downtown L.A. Also with us, with a different perspective, is Jonathan Keller. He is the president and CEO of the California Family Council. We appreciate him sharing his perspective tonight. Gloria, let's start with you. We have talked about this issue for so many years together now, talked about your personal connection to this issue. This is one of the causes of your life. Now that it's finally happened, which a lot of us expected, what's going through your mind tonight?
Well, first of all, I want to commend all of the protesters. Yes, they're disrupting life in Los Angeles by being on the freeway and being on the pavements and then in the street. But our lives are being disrupted in a major way, in a very dangerous way. So here's to them. I agree. We won't go back. It is devastating. It is catastrophic. It is so dangerous what has happened to women and that they are losing control over their lives. And it's not to be tolerated. We have to go to the street. We have to go to the streets. We have to go to the State House, the courthouse. We have to go to the White House, and we have to take our country back from the extremists who do not trust women to make decisions about their own body, who want to control our bodies and who want to control our lives, and who are putting women and young girls' lives at risk. We will fight back. We will win. It will be a long battle, but I'm confident that we will win it.
Jonathan,
All right, so before we even get to John's response, I'm just kind of interested in kind of your kind of thoughts, what you're kind of observing about that, and maybe also if you are in John's position, because obviously, again, not a dialogue, you've got like a couple of minutes, and she just, there's multiple layers of things that she has kind of dropped there.
So many.
And what are you thinking if you are...
Yeah. So if I was sitting there on the other side in this interview, I am trying to piece through all the different things that she said all at once, which is about 70 different arguments in the span of 30 seconds. And there's no way that you're going to be able to address them all. And so, like, if Jonathan picks one and does that, I'm not going to critique that. Like, that is also what I would have to do. Yeah. I think that the biggest things that she's focusing on right now are women's rights to their bodies and the idea that overturning Roe is taking us back into this dark ages period where women have no control over their bodies. Back to bodily autonomy again, right? Yeah. And so I think if I was sitting there, that's kind of the two directions I would go. I would try to really focus our conversation in, because right now she's just kind of spewing slogans and talking points that cover a bunch of different categories. Yeah. And I want to try to narrow our conversation into what are we really talking about here? And so I think the first thing that I would probably do is reference how I believe that basically being pro-life, having this new era in American history where the unborn are going to be protected, at least in many states, is a very progressive move forward of recognizing the human rights of all humans. And I want to flip her narrative on its head. That's not a move I would make in a normal dialogue, on a college campus.
Totally.
Not at all. But if I'm doing a TV interview, this is totally different. And I want to be giving people little things to think about in a very short period of time. And so that's probably the first place I would go. And then I would go affirm her concerns about bodily autonomy, talk about how important I think bodily autonomy is, but point out the fact that we have lots of restrictions that are put on what we can and cannot do with our bodies. And if I had the time, I might even start talking about thalidomide. We'll put a link in the description to our bodily rights landing page, because I think there's a lot that we can talk about there about what bodily autonomy means and doesn't mean, the restrictions that we have on it. And I think I would try to steer the conversation in that direction. I have a feeling she's not going to want to go there with me, but I want to at least kind of drop a little bit of that. That's my gut. I'm curious how you differ, because I'm watching your face right now.
I think no. I think that's I think that's like the best plan that I could think of too. I think like my temptation is to focus in on her use of the word extremists. Like, I just got called an extremist on TV and I haven't said anything yet. Like, there'd be some temptation if I was in a really snarky move to kind of do something along the lines of, it doesn't seem extremist to me to be trying to protect thousands of people from being killed. And just having the Supreme Court say that this should go back to the states instead of it being a Supreme Court and just 9 people decide everything for everyone. That doesn't seem extremist to me. Like there'd be some kind of part of me that would want to do that. I don't think it would be the best move. I think your idea is better. Okay. But that's kind of those are kind of like the forks in the road for me. Let's see what John did.
Your thoughts? Gloria says this is dangerous. She says people that you support are extremists. Your reaction?
Well, first off, Alex, thanks for having me, and it really is an honor to be across from Gloria. I know she has a legendary career, not just on this issue, but on so many issues. Look, I think the honest truth is that we do have a difference of opinion here. We disagree on some fundamental issues, but I think an important thing for us to remember is what the Supreme Court is doing here is actually, I think, a pro-democracy move. It is returning this right back to the people and to their elected representatives. Now, what that's going to mean here in California, obviously, not a whole lot is going to change. In fact, we've already seen Governor Newsom and several other state leaders that are talking about expanding abortion rights in the state of California. But my concern as the leader of California Family Council and as a pro-life advocate, I just think that a lot of the ways we're talking about this is really out of step with the vast majority of not just Americans, but even Californians. This is an issue that brings up a lot of heat, a lot of tension. I was just at the Capitol in Sacramento on Wednesday. We had over 1,000 people in triple-digit heat for the second annual California March for Life. And it is absolutely true that there's a strong division of opinions on this. But that's why I think a one-size-fits-all policy from the federal government is just not a good idea. I think this should be left up to individual states. And even within the state of California, I think there is a lot of common ground. I think, for example, that most people in our state, they don't want abortion to be used as birth control. They don't want abortion to be used for sex selection purposes. I would hope that we'd be able to come together and find ways to reach across the aisle and provide pro-woman, pro-child, pro-family policies that are good for all Californians.
So I really love the first thing that he did there.
Me too. That's the thing I was going to point out to you.
He immediately started by complimenting Gloria.
Honoring
her and like how amazing it was for him to have the privilege to talk to her. Like I immediately came in interested in what he was going to say after that because like my pro-choice Emily's expectation of what some pro-lifer on TV is going to do is just start immediately going after the arguments and bashing everything she just said, especially when you just got insulted by being called an extremist. And simply in the fact that he didn't do that automatically made pro-choice Emily want to listen to him. It wasn't what I expected him to do. And I think anytime you in a conversation can do something that is unexpected, people take stock, like they take a break and notice what that is.
Intriguing.
Yes. What I would probably improve or what I might have done is get a little bit more specific. I noticed he said two things in there, but didn't go in and provide any example or back them up. He said that you and I, like Gloria and Jonathan, we disagree about some fundamental things. And then he moved on. And I was like, I would have spent a minute explaining what those fundamental things are, purely for the purpose of me being able to get across at least a nugget of what the pro-life position is. Something like, you and I disagree fundamentally about what the unborn is and whether all members of the human species deserve an equal right to be protected from violence. Like I would have said something like that and then moved on, added an extra 10 seconds. And the second thing he said was that a lot of Californians don't agree with kind of what the pro-choice lobby is pushing for. I would have gotten more specific. We know we have studies about what pro-choice people alone just think about abortion. We know statistically, at least as of a 2019 study that I'm aware of, 72% of pro-choice people do not believe that abortion should be available for all 9 months of pregnancy. And to my knowledge, that's what they're pushing for in California. And that's something that if I was going into an interview about this, I would want to have some of those stats ready rather than just pointing to, I was at a giant march recently. Like that's not as meaningful as if you can say, look, pro-choice people in California are pushing for this on a governmental level, and that's out of step with what our state actually wants. Even you, as a pro-choice lobbyist, are not in touch with reality. And so I would have added more specifics there that I think maybe Jonathan wasn't prepared for, or he could have just used the things he already knows, because I'm betting he knows a lot of that stuff. If he could have really employed that in the conversation, it might have been more interesting and persuasive to the person watching.
I mean, if it were me and I didn't go there, it would be like, just because I'm so distracted by all the things, like, no, I mean,
you and I've both been in this situation.
It's like looking back, it's like, oh, I wish I said this other thing instead. I really do like the common groundy stuff that he was doing. Kind of say like towards the end there, like, look, now that the Supreme Court has brought it back to the states, hopefully we pro-life, pro-choice people can come together, reach across the aisle, and try to come up with some I thought that was really good. He seems reasonable.
Absolutely.
He's likable, and he's been way nicer to her than she has been to him. I think for like the extreme pro-choice people, they're not going to be annoyed by that at all. They're going to love that she's going to like tear him a new one. Like I know. But for anyone kind of at all in the middle of the issue, or having like they have some exceptions on both sides or whatever, I think John's doing well so far for that.
He really sandwiched the harder stuff in the middle. He started out with really common ground and ended with common ground. I think my only critique is that I would have made the hard stuff in the middle a little harder.
A little bit more clear.
A little clearer, a little more examples, but keep everything into the beginning and end. It was excellent.
I think that definitely would have made what Gloria does next harder for her if he had done that. But let's see what happens.
Well, Jonathan, if I may respond, first of all, with all due respect, the family the anti-choice movement, which calls itself the pro-life movement, which I will call the mandatory motherhood movement, is really not.
We're just gonna pause it right there. If you are trying to persuade anyone about anything, you should use the language that they use to describe themselves. I will happily call people pro-choice. If you want to call yourself pro-abortion, I've had pro-choice people say to me, no, I believe I'm pro-abortion. Cool, fine. I'll use pro-abortion to talk about you. I want to get to know what they actually think.
Yeah.
And just using labels doesn't help.
Yeah.
Especially using derogatory labels doesn't help. Using an inaccurate label makes them just feel like they don't understand you.
Yeah.
Using a derogatory label makes them feel like you don't even care to understand them.
Yeah. If John had been, okay, well, she just called herself pro-choice, but like we all know they're just a bunch of pro-aborts. It would have been like...
it's the exact same thing. It's not helpful.
Same thing. And I mean, but what's a little bit cleverer about what she did, though, is she is trying... It's like she keeps on trying to like bring in these little... They're like arguments, but they're sort of assertions that are like linked to an argument. But then maybe people are thinking, oh, yeah, I don't like forced motherhood. But it's just like... I've always had this thing, like I've talked about, we know, like pro-lifers sometimes get frustrated with that for even saying pro-choice and saying that it's good to use neutral terms. But like, I will jump in if the person I'm talking to calls me anti-choice. Like there are terms that are so either derogatory or so far from neutral on their end. If they call the unborn child a parasite, I'm going to be like, okay, I'm willing to call it a fetus. I'll meet me halfway.
Yes.
That's such a dehumanizing term. But what she did, and I've never seen someone do this before, is go from anti-choice, which is about the most derogatory thing that pro-life people are typically called, and actually escalated it.
And I've actually never heard forced motherhood. I hear forced birthers all the time.
Yeah.
But forced motherhood is a new one.
Yeah. That's interesting. So yeah, do we think, though, given, again, the TV debate thing, like, do we think that what she just did here was effective, or is it going to turn people off?
I think that it was effective at doing what she's trying to do. I think she's trying to turn people who are watching away from Jonathan. Like, make him lose brownie points so they're less likely to take him seriously. And I think that works for an average person that, say, doesn't have a really well-formed opinion about abortion. Like, a strong pro-life person's not going to be persuaded by that. A strong pro-choice person's already on her side.
Right.
The people in the middle, it's almost like this psychological trick that she's doing. It just makes him look bad in the language she's using so that the next time he talks, I just have this negative perception of him a little bit already.
Right.
Like, it has been dampened.
Yeah.
And so I do think it's an effective tactic for what she's trying to do. I think it's horrible, and that shouldn't be what she's trying to do.
Right.
But it's working.
Yeah.
Implementing family values in some states. For example, there are states that even if a teenager gets pregnant, and even if she wants to have an abortion, and even if her parents agree that she should be able to have a safe and legal abortion, that family will not be honored in that state. Their choice will not be honored. They will not be able to get a legal abortion in that state. So much for family values. And again, I don't.
So much for family values. Okay, so that's an interesting move. She's essentially trying to take
his thing
and flip it on its head and take something that typically appeals to conservative Republicans, whatever, and flip it. That basically now she's turned it into like moral relativism of families. We talk about sometimes that there's two main kinds of relativism. There's true, like, moral relativism that's just like, what's true for me is true for me, individual version. Yeah. And then there's the cultural version. Yeah. She's created a third version, the family version. But like, what is true for your family? We should be honoring individual families' wishes, which I feel like is her attempt at creating the conservative version of relativism.
That's super interesting. I didn't see that, but I think there's something to that. So we can tell what she's trying to do. I think this is a case where I think this execution was worse than what she was doing before.
Oh, yeah.
Though, because it is such a weak argument to be like, well, it's not very much family values if you're not letting some parents decide that their teen, or parents and a teen decide that she should have an abortion. Like, it's just like, it's so like, It's only meaningful if you're right about abortion, and it's super not meaningful if you're not. Like we can just trot out toddlers all day here, and just, like, it's not that persuasive. And so I feel like she went from like more clever arguments to like this is like she's going downhill a little bit as far as like the effectiveness of the arguments, but. It's an interesting thing that she is trying to kind of like put this bad spin on family values.
Yeah, and I don't think it's really the smart move.
I don't think that was the best move. No. She could have done better.
Don't agree that a fetus should have, or that even a fertilized egg should have more rights than an adult woman. Yes, we're pro-choice in California, and we are darn proud of it as well. And we fought to make this a pro-choice state, and we are going to make sure that it stays a pro-choice state. But what about all the other women and girls' lives you are placing at risk? Let's not live in a fantasy world, Jonathan. There are people who are going to have abortions, but they're going to be illegal. They're going to be unsafe abortions, and they're going to die from infections, or they're going to die, or they're going to be maimed. And, you know, this is not right to put a woman and a young girl's life at risk. Poor women and young women and rural women and women of color, you know they don't have a voice. You know they don't have power. And now they don't have rights to control their own body. And that is wrong and cruel and dangerous.
Okay. So before, maybe you can respond to like the back alley kind of thing that she's doing. The thing that I was observing before she got there was just kind of thinking, like putting myself in the shoes of, again, like someone who's kind of in the middle and is watching this. I'll tell you, whenever I do watch something like this on any topic where there's, you know, some kind of like a little panel, whether it's 2, 4, 6 people debating an issue for a while on TV, and I don't watch this that often, but occasionally, if I'm at the airport and this is on in the background or whatever, like if anyone in there is sounding like they are giving a rally speech, like there's this like forcefulness and they're raising their voice, it has the opposite effect on me than I think that they're intending. I'm like,
interesting.
I'm like, I don't like, it doesn't feel like that this is a person that's trying to be really thoughtful and nuanced. It feels like it's closer to bully tactics, closer to I'm going to talk over you, I'm going to be louder than you, and if I'm louder than you, then I'm definitely right, like that kind of thing. And I'm just like, I become even more suspicious. I've got my extra skeptic hat on right now, whereas John being kind of like, you know, calm, reasonable, thoughtful. I feel like as far as like tone, he's doing really well. And I wonder if Gloria kind of maybe got a little bit messed up here because she just came from a rally. Like, presumably she just gave a rally speech. And I wonder if that means, like, she's kind of in that mode. And then she's kind of gone over here. And I wonder if she's even trying to do that thing. If she is, I don't think that's the most effective way to get people on. I think it'll get the extremists on your side pumping their fists. But you don't need that, especially in California. They're
already on your side.
They're already on your side.
I noticed another thing that you did. The thing that more turned me off than what you mentioned was the fact that she made a deliberate switch from talking about just like pro-life people in general. I think these laws are bad. I think their policies are bad. To you.
You are dangerous.
You
You're
individually.
Bad man.
And I'm like, as a neutral observer, Gloria, you don't know Jonathan.
Right.
You know nothing about him. You are now making ridiculous accusations.
Yeah.
You can say, I think that pro-life laws are dangerous to women.
Yeah.
But to say that this guy on television is dangerous to women, like his existence, that's just like a different level of attack that feels unnecessary and also very unpersuasive.
She's only 1 degree off from calling him a racist.
Yeah.
It's like, you know that women of color don't have power and you've just taken more power away from them and you know what you're doing and you know that it's making it dangerous.
Yeah.
Like, let's have a conversation about that. Again, it's frustrating for me to watch sometimes the TV debate thing because it's like, there's so many things I would want to do here if this were like an actual dialogue that's not going to work on camera. Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting. Anything else that you want to say on that before we move on?
No.
Okay.
Jonathan, your response?
Well, you know, it's interesting. One of those states that is full of a lot of poorer women, especially women of color, is Louisiana. We had State Senator Katrina Jackson from the state of Louisiana speak to us on the steps of the Capitol just this last Wednesday. Senator Jackson is an African-American woman but she is also pro-life. And I think that we really can have a difference of opinion on this. We don't have to, I think, demonize each other. We don't have to attack one another. And I'm actually grateful to see that in many parts of the country, the life issue, the desire to try to protect both unborn children, but also their mothers and their families, it really can be a bipartisan issue. I think this is something that there's a lot more that we have in common as Americans. I think nobody wants to see young people faced with a difficult pregnancy. Nobody wants to see a child born into a home where they're not going to be loved and taken care of. There's a lot of common ground, and I think what we need to do, I know it's hard on a day like today, but we need to try to find ways to tone down some of the rhetoric and hopefully reach across the aisle for the good of families and communities.
So this is interesting to me. Okay.
Yes.
So, and I think effective, but I want to ask you. So he's, instead of directly trying to like counter like all of this danger, back alley abortion stuff that he has just asserted, he is kind of moving the direction of like continuing like there's common ground. We need to stop demonizing each other. Wink, wink. Like, see, just
Right.
like since he got
The
on.
pro-life movement is diverse.
The pro-life movement is diverse. I guess I'm curious. There's one element of it that I'm not super convinced of, but the general thing he's doing of pointing at we need to be able to do better dialogue on this issue, and there is possibility for common ground, as like in contrast to what he's doing, as opposed to choosing to do a more of like an apologist. I'm going to now counter the false things that you just said. What do you think about that strategy in this context?
I'm torn because
I know, right?
as soon as he started talking, and I could tell he wasn't going to go the direction that I would have gone, because I would have gone the apologist direction. Like if I was sitting in this interview, I know what I would have done in my own head because that's usually how I
Role play
operate.
it real quick. Just role play it. Go
All
ahead.
right. So I would have said something like, I got to like center myself here. So
You're dangerous. You know it. You're taking away people's power, and it is wrong.
So I firmly believe that myself and the entire pro-life movement is not interested in causing any woman to get injured or get hurt in an abortion, whether it's legal or illegal. Like, I want people to be safe. And ultimately, that's why I'm pro-life, because I believe that that is a position of anti-violence. I believe that abortion is a human rights violation. And I really can't think of any other times where we would keep a human rights violation legal just to make it safer for it to keep happening. You can disagree with me about what abortion is. Like, we can go talk about that. But you have to understand that from my perspective, I'm trying to save innocent people from violence. And that means that I want to be helping women have the resources to not feel like they have to have an abortion. But I also think that deliberately killing humans has to be illegal in the process.
Okay, so pause. So that's so fantastic. So that's a really good contrast between here's
Yes,
like what the
what I
apologist
would have
thing
done.
to do, and John probably would have done something fairly similar to that
Yeah.
if he wanted to go that direction. Or what John did was just, we're going to kind of key in on the difference in the way that we're talking about this and talk about like we need to like calm the tone down. Between those two things, you're torn. What do you like? Tell me more about your thoughts.
Yeah, my brain is going like 6,000 directions right now. So I don't like what he did in that I want there to be a nugget of pro-life argument somewhere.
Okay.
And thus far, I haven't heard it. If he had done in his first segment a little bit of a nugget of the pro-life argument,
Right.
I think I would have been more okay with this.
Interesting.
Because I try in all of the interviews that I do to at least get a piece in there for someone to think about in terms of this is how the pro-life movement thinks.
Right.
I didn't realize that. I thought they all just hated women. Like,
Right.
I want to give a piece of like, this is actually more complicated than you think it is, to invite them to do thinking, and hopefully they'll look me up later or they'll do
Right.
more research. Like, I'm not going to change people's minds based on a 5-minute TV interview. I know that.
Right.
But I would like to get somewhere in there some nugget. And since he hasn't done that, that made me more uncomfortable with what he did here. I think if it had been there earlier, I would have been fine with it, because I love the move he's doing to point out that the pro-life movement isn't what you think.
Yeah.
He's breaking down a lot of stereotypes there of we want to work together, we're trying to help women, our movement is diverse. Like, I think all of those are worthy things to bring out.
Yeah.
But I think if you go an entire interview without making any pro-life argument, you almost get the perception that he doesn't have any. Which I know he does.
Right. Yes, he
but
does.
it's like, if he doesn't bring any up at all, and it's all just, let's work together, let's common ground, I, sitting as a neutral observer, am going to be like, well, why would I work with you when you are an idiot? Like, you have no argument to your position. You just think this ridiculous thing that this, clump of cells is just as valuable as a toddler. And everyone knows that's not true because it's a clump of cells. Like, if you don't make any sort of, this is why the pro-life position makes sense. I feel like I'm less inclined to say, yes, let's work together. You're reasonable.
Right. You've got to have some reason to think that there's something to their position that maybe you don't understand, or at least a reasonable reason to be pro-life as opposed to whatever, like the default. I think that's a really, really good point. The one thing that I didn't love in the direction John went was, like, at first it seemed like he was about to do something super, super clever. He went straight to, let's talk about Louisiana, where there's a lot of poor people, like, obviously. And then he started talking about, like, I was just talking to this black pro-life politician or whoever. And I thought I was about to go to kind of how she would have responded to what Gloria was saying. But
that would have been better.
But he kind of shifted there to kind of more like common grounding kinds of things. And so we have to be careful about something that can kind of come across like functionally just saying, I have a black pro-life friend.
Yeah,
and that could come across like that. I think like that's the direction that John was going. And I imagine if he's anything like me, got a little bit flustered and kind of went like back to common groundy, let's not be demonizing each other's stuff. But there was a really interesting potential second half of that sentence that might have been pretty effective. I'm not sure if it would have, because either way, you're just kind of bringing in someone else's opinion or whatever.
But it's different than saying, I am right because I have a black pro-life friend.
Yes.
If you're saying, like, I have this black pro-life friend, they deal with this question a lot. I'm going to, like, basically speak in what they would say here because I think it's helpful perspective. Yeah. It's not my perspective. I'm not, like, saying that I'm right because of this. I'm just offering I am lifting up a voice that is often marginalized and giving them space to explain their position.
Right. Do you think that the direction John went here, though, where he's doing the kind of, again, the common groundy, let's not be demon, like he's doing a contrasting thing between him and the way she's acting. Do you think that puts some pressure on her to back off the demonization rhetoric stuff? Or does he look worse right now if she's about to go back to that because he just kind of called out demonization?
Totally.
Interesting.
I think she does look worse.
Yeah.
I don't think many people are going to be persuaded by that, though.
Yeah.
Because of, A, the demographic of people usually watching this, and B, I think the fact that he didn't make any pro-life argument has hurt him slightly in the credibility level. Just slightly. Like, he still has a lot because he was doing all of the common ground things. I don't think it's enough that it's really going to sway people, but I definitely think she does look worse. Yeah. Just not a lot worse. She's, like, dropped by a peg because of this, and I would like to see her go way further down because her behavior is not acceptable. Yeah. And I don't think people are going to take it super serious.
Do not want pro-lifers acting the way that she's acting, even if it's rhetorically effective, even if it gets more feeling. Is like, no, we should not mistreat people.
Well, Jonathan, with all due respect, I don't intend to tone it down. I am not going to be silent in the face of injustice, and all those protesters and marchers that you're seeing are not going to be silent while you decide what they can do with their own bodies. With all due respect, sir, again, you will never be pregnant. You never have been pregnant. You don't know what it's like to be pregnant. You don't know what it's like to be a single mother supporting children and not able to afford another pregnancy and to deliver and give birth and support another child. You have no idea what that is like. You don't know what it's like to have to undergo an illegal abortion. So come on. This is, you know, you can have pretty words and we can talk about compromise, but there's no compromise about, because you have no.
Okay. This is too much of a run-on sentence. Okay. Notice in the beginning how she actually, and I don't know if this is on purpose or not, but she twisted John's argument. She twisted it from, like, let's tone down the rhetoric to accusing him, basically, or at least implying that he's saying that they all have to be silent. So he said, we won't be silent. Those protesters won't be silent. He never said anything about being silent.
Right. He never said, you need to stop talking. We're not interested in discussing abortion.
He was like, this is like pro-democracy kinds of stuff. Right. Like reaching across the aisle only makes sense if both sides are talking to each other. So I really don't like that move. I feel like that is one of the like lowest things that he's done here. It's more subtle than some of the things that he's done here, but basically trying to get people to think that he's trying to say that women need to be silenced is screwed up.
Yeah.
What else would you like to say?
That's not even what he was saying.
Yeah.
The other thing that really frustrated me about this whole exchange is that she has now fully escalated to solely you language. Like, she started out in the first section, it was all the more generic, all pro-life people. The second segment, she flipped halfway through, and now it is solely you are doing this, you are a man. It is entirely in personal accusation territory, which I think is going to be effective because I'm staring at the bottom bar right here, and I can tell that he's not going to respond. There's 20 seconds left. Yeah. If he gets to respond, it's going to be like 3 words.
Yeah. I mean,
and so,
luckily people watching live in the beginning weren't seeing the red bar.
Right. So they didn't know that. But like, I can tell, and I don't know if that was a pre-planned stopping point or if the people running the show, the producers wanted to cut it off. But like, regardless, her getting to end on that strong point of accusing him.
Right.
Basically erases most everything, not everything, but most everything Jonathan got the chance to do before in the eyes of a neutral observer.
Yeah, and that's not John's fault. But like,
and that's not his fault at all.
He got the opening words and the closing words, and that is not what you do in a situation like this.
Exactly.
Let's go back a little bit, because a lot's happening, and see if there's anything else.
Dear, what that is like. You don't know what it's like to have to undergo an illegal abortion. So, come on. This is, you can have pretty words.
Oh, yeah. I thought that was super interesting.
You can have pretty words.
You can have pretty words. I think that is sort of the admission that John's tone in this has been really effective. Yeah. She knows that is effective, and she's trying to kind of make his calm niceness like a downside, and trying to kind of like attack that. Like, it doesn't matter. You can sound nice, but that's not the real thing. The real thing is like this other thing. And I feel like that shows too much card. I think she just kind of revealed that there is this huge difference between their tone, and like, I feel complimented. I'm glad that you like the pretty words I'm saying, and they actually have meaning behind them too. But like, let's have a calm conversation, like that kind of thing. I thought that was super interesting that she dropped that. I
think it also shows that she wouldn't be willing to listen to anything that he had to say. It makes her look a lot less reasonable.
Yes.
Like, if we had been in a world where this conversation had gone on for a really long time and Jonathan had made a ton of pro-life arguments and like, we had gotten to really the meat of it.
She's not interested.
She's not interested in that. She's made that quite evident.
Completely closed-minded.
It's like nothing he says could be worth her even listening to.
Right.
Talk about compromise, but there's no compromise because you have no right to decide what I can do with my body.
Okay, unfortunately, we are out of time, although I would love to keep this conversation going, and I appreciate both of you sharing your perspectives, which are so passionate. Thank you both, Jonathan and Gloria.
Passionate's one word.
Really
That's an interesting word for that.
I mean, that's probably arguably the best word that you could use on television to describe what just happened.
Yeah.
Passionate.
I'm proud of John. I would not have wanted to go in and do this.
Oh, goodness, no.
And the fact, like, it's set up against him from the beginning. Even if he got in the last words or got to be the first words, like, as soon, and they know this, as soon as you put Gloria Allred up against any guy pro-lifer, you've instantly taken away like half of the force of anything it's going to be able to say. Because at some point, she's going to be like, well, who cares? It doesn't matter what you say because you're a man. And he doesn't even get a chance to respond to that.
Yeah, which is not fair. But PR-wise, he's set up to fail. Yeah. Just because he's a man, which is ridiculous.
So frustrating. Because like, what do you do? What do you do? Do you decide to then still go with it? Or do you try to like, only accept the things that are more fair? I've struggled with trying to figure that out since the beginning of my career with things like this. So it is a really, really hard call. I think John could have done so much worse.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I think he could have done a little bit better, but I think what he did was so much better than how, like, so many pro-life people I know, if they had put on this thing, even colleagues, like, I would rather have John there than a lot of people that I can think of that could have been on there instead.
Yes. And especially being in the heat of the moment. It's so easy to sit here and be like, this is what I would have said. Yeah. When you're there and you're actually dealing with Gloria accusing you
of being
right
a horrible
now.
person in 5 different ways.
Yes. Like, the way that he reacted to that was so reasonable that I think he did as well as anybody would have in this situation. I think it was a really good representation.
We know sometimes the only good thing a pro-life person is going to pull off in their first interaction with a pro-choice person is merely showing them that at least one thoughtful, reasonable pro-lifer exists. And John just did that on TV. And so, like, I love that. I think you make some really good points and some really good observations. Overall, John did so much better than her as far as being, like, a good, moral, respectful human. And Gloria was frustratingly fairly effective in a lot of the kind of debate strategies that she did, but I think she also hurt herself in some ways, too. That's kind of my overall. Anything that you'd add or adjust to that?
No, I think that's a perfect representation of what we just saw.
Yeah. All right. So if you would like to learn more tips, we have a course for you. We've got a coupon code for you. If you want to learn, it's like 5 hours on what we have found to be the most effective pro-life arguments, all those kinds of things that Emily was role-playing earlier. It's in the course. And so if you want to get that, equippedcourse.com. We'd love for you to be helped by that, because if you're pro-life, you know from watching this, this is a really hard time for having calm, respectful, effective dialogues. And I think using the things that we teach in the course will kind of give you the best chance that you have. And we want all of the pro-life people becoming more effective at the same time. So thanks for watching. Go have a good conversation.